So we'll discuss tonight, since Simchas Torah is approaching, as well as the beginning of Sefer Bereshis, so we'll discuss about the end of the Torah, and specifically the Shemona Psukim, the last 8 verses in the Torah. As we all know, one of the fundamental beliefs, the 13 Animamin, the Rambam brings down, is to believe in Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah. We know Torah's Moshe. That's a fundamental belief. However, there's an interesting discussion in the Gemara about who wrote the last 8 psukim. Was it Moshe or not? So I'll just read a little bit from the Gemara, and then we'll discuss it more at length. So the Gemara could be found in a couple of places. One is in Menachos, Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, as well as Baba Basra, Daf Tezayin. So there's a machlokas in the Gemara, Mi Kasam, who wrote the last 8 psukim of the Torah? Did Moshe Kasvam or Yoshua Kasvam? Did Moshe write the last 8 psukim, like he wrote the previous, like the rest of the Torah? Or no, did Yehoshua write them? Why should this be an issue? I don't ask who wrote the first 8 psukim in the Torah, or the middle 8 psukim, or the 75% mark. Why should there even be a discussion? Maybe it's heresy even raising the question. Why would I think the burden of proof is to say Moshe didn't write it? Because you shtel the chazaka, as they say, if he wrote everything else, why would I assume he did not write the end? So the Gemara explains, quoting, because the last 8 psukim begin Vayamas Sham Moshe. It's basically the obituary of Moshe Rabbeinu. It talks about the death of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Gemara says, V'chi efshar Moshe Chai. Is it possible that Moshe was alive? Because of, and he wrote Vayamas Sham Moshe? Can Moshe write about his death while he was still alive? Havi davar zeh nireh kisheker. That would appear like a falsehood. We know Moshe, the Torah is emes, Moshe emes, v'Torah emes. We sing on Simchas Torah. So how could it be? The issue is, how could Moshe bring the last 8 psukim? Because it says Vayamas Sham Moshe, and if he wrote it, it appears that he had to be alive because he's writing Moshe died while he was alive. Well, that's Rav Shimon. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Hence Rabbi Yehuda concludes that it must have been Yehoshua, because Moshe couldn't write the last 8 psukim. So Moshe's student Yehoshua, he wrote the last 8 psukim. And Rav Shimon disagrees and says no. It says Lo kach ha-sefer Torah zeh. When Moshe said to the Jewish people in Devarim Lamed Aleph Chavav, Lo kach ha-sefer Torah zeh, v'chi efshar she'ha-sefer chaser davar. Is it possible that the whole Torah, we talk about Torah's Moshe, is it possible that the whole Torah wasn't written by Moshe? Therefore, al karchacha Moshe kasvam. Therefore, Rav Shimon says, just like Moshe wrote the rest of the Torah, Moshe wrote the last 8 psukim. And then, so each one will have to deal with the other one's taina. And if you say Moshe wrote it, then you have to try to explain, then how can he write it if he wasn't dead yet? But if Yehoshua wrote it, you have to explain why we always call it Torah's Moshe. So you'll have to go and explain each one. So the Gemara anyway concludes anyway. So according to, even though, so how do you deal with the question if it looks like sheker? if Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it, so how can he write Vayam Hashem Moshe? So the Gemara says that Rav Shimon says these last 8 psukim Moshe wrote differently than he wrote the previous part of the Torah. What was the distinction then? If it was a difference, how was it different? The Gemara says as follows: Ad kan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, up for the whole Torah, Hashem said, Hashem told it to Moshe, Moshe Omer Vikose, Moshe repeated it, and then he wrote it down. So Hashem said it to Moshe, Moshe told it to the Jewish people, Vikose, and then he wrote it down. That's how he did for the whole Torah. However, the last 8 psukim, Mikan ve'elech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, Hashem told it to Moshe, Moshe kosev b'dema, and Moshe wrote it b'dema. We'll have to see what b'dema means. But simple pshat, the cry. Moshe wrote it in tears. We'll have to see what that means exactly. But so we see there are 2 differences between the last 8 psukim and the rest of the Torah. One is Kol Torah Chazar La Moshe Lafiksi. Moshe repeated it, he said it over before he wrote it. And the last 8 psukim he did not tell it over to the Jewish people. And the second distinction is Moshe wrote it b'dema. So what does that mean he wrote it b'dema? So in fact, it's interesting, Tosas points out, this is the minhag for the sofer, the scribe, the people who write the Sifrei Torah. They have other Torahs in front of them, but before they write it down, they say the words before. Same thing here. So Rashi writes, what does it mean? Because of the Dema, he says Moshe wrote it the Rashi says what? The Moshe Rabbeinu was Mitzayer. Moshe Rabbeinu, he couldn't even say it. He was so upset that he was going to die that he wrote sorrow, so he wrote it in tears. In other words, like the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu was pleading at the end of his life, please keep me alive, even make me like a bird so I could sing to you Shira. Moshe realized every moment of life is precious and you can do mitzvahs. And once you go to the Olam HaEmes, you can no longer get Chazat the Vilna Gaon used to always say, just putting on a pair of tzitzis or doing any one mitzvah, we have a tremendous opportunity in Olam HaEmes. So Moshe Rabbeinu, as we know, that Moshe Rabbeinu was not just at the end of his life, but Moshe Rabbeinu even before, because Moshe was mitztayer, that when he was found out that he couldn't enter the land of Israel, the Gemara tells us in Sota, Moshe was under tremendous distress because he said he wouldn't be able to fulfill. Why did he want to go to Israel? Not to eat shwama, but he wanted to fulfill the mitzvahs hatuyas ba'aretz. He wanted to fulfill the special mitzvahs you only can fulfill in Eretz Yisrael. What's he worried about? What's he getting all worked up about? If you're in Chutz La'aretz, you don't have, it's not like he had a mitzvah to do it, he wasn't going to do it. You're not obligated in the mitzvah, so what was he all worked up about? But that was the hashkafa Moshe Rabbeinu. He wanted to put himself in a situation where he could fulfill as many mitzvahs as possible. And that he only can do in Eretz Yisrael. And that's the same concept we have by the mitzvah of tzitzis. Mitzvah of tzitzis isn't the normative mitzvah we have, like the mitzvah of tefillin, the mitzvah of matzah, the mitzvah of lulav. We have a mandatory mitzvah, we have to do it. It's not like you have a choice. I mean, of course you have a choice to fulfill the word of God or not. But everyone has free choice. But if you want to do what the Torah demands, then you don't have a choice. You have to put on tefillin. But tzitzis is unique. It's only a conditional mitzvah. That if you're wearing a 4-cornered garment, then you're obligated to wear tzitzis, and you get a biblical commandment. But if you're not wearing a 4-cornered garment, you're not obligated. So the minhag today is we do wear a 4-cornered garment. It's a good life insurance policy, as the Gemara tells us, that b'shas kaso, during a time of danger, time when God is angry, even though you might deserve punishment, but if you're wearing your tzitzis, your tzitzis could protect you. But more so, it's the same. We want to be like Moshe Rabbeinu. We want to be in a position that we can fulfill as many mitzvahs as possible. You see, Moshe, throughout his lifetime, is mitzvah. This fits in. He was very upset that he was going to die now, and how he, because he was Moshe, he knew he was about to die, and he was very upset. So that's what it means. He was in tears. He was crying because of he didn't want to die. We'll see later on that, maybe there's more to it than that he just didn't want to die, because more things he could have done. But that's how Rashi learns. It's a simple pshat, and that's how they explain also by Yirmiyah that he wasn't also different kina v'tzar. But either way, that's the first pshat, Rashi, that because of the rov tsar about the pain of his death, that he wouldn't have the opportunity to fulfill mitzvahs anymore. So therefore, that's why all the tears were happening. Let's move along to the Maharsha. The Maharsha is in Baba Basra, Daf Tezvav Amud Aleph. The Maharsha has a very interesting explanation. But what does it mean? That Moshe wrote the last 8 psukim b'dema. So the Maharsha writes, he wants to explain how does Rav Shimon, if you say that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last 8 psukim, how do you deal with the complaint? But Michse Kashikra, looks like he's lying, he's still alive, and he's writing about that he died. So he wants to deal with that issue. So it's very interesting pshat, the Maharsha. The Maharsha says as follows, that we know we have a concept in the halacha regarding ksiva, writing, that to violate the ksiva on Shabbos, or for let's say for it to be considered ksiva for a document, a get, it has to be a davar hamiskayim. It has to be something which is lasting. So for instance, let's say you're on a sand on the beach, you write letters and the wind's going to blow out. So that would not be, pashtus, a biblical prohibition. Or let's say on the car, when it's foggy out on the car, but on the window, because the car is muksa, but you're allowed to touch muksa. That's a misnomer, you can't move muksa. But let's say whether it's on your car window, any window, you want to write, people write the names in it. So that's davar, and that would not be a biblical violation. And it would not, because it's not halachically considered ksiva. So the Gemara says, how is the last 8 psukim different? Moshe did not say it. He wrote it in tears. So the Maharsha wants to say, how it could be Moshe, and we're not worried about Nira Kasheka, because he never said it. It's always worse. We always try to do things more indirectly. Even if you're going to, let's say you have to not tell the truth all the time, it's better to say it in a way where it could be interpreted 2 ways. Like the famous case we know with Yaakov Avinu, the Ish HaEmes, when he was talking to Yitzchak about getting the bracha, the bechora, the firstborn. So he says, he said it in a way that Yaakov understood to mean Ani Esav, I am Esav, but really he was saying in a way we are Esav bechor. But in other words, he said in a way where the pasuk could be interpreted in both ways, and he meant it one way, and it was said another way. So when you have to answer one way, even when you're not telling the truth, it's always better not to lie directly, say it indirectly. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to say it because it was a sheker. He didn't want to say to the people, "Vayam Hashem Moshe," so he didn't say it. So number one, he didn't lie. He didn't say anything. And what about, but he wrote it? Writing it's better than saying it, but that's what the Maharsha says. The rest of the Torah was written in ink. This part was written in tears. Tears is only something temporary, so that's what they wanted to deal with it. But most halachically speaking, Moshe didn't say it. He didn't write it either because it's a davar she'eino miskayim, and that's how the Maharsha deals with how Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last 8 psukim and wasn't considered. He minimalized the problem of nira kasheker. It appears like falsehood. So that's the Maharsha. Moving along, there's a famous pshat in the Vilna Gaon. The famous Vilna Gaon who his yahrzeit is over Sukkot, Cholamite Sukkot, I believe. And there's always so much Torah on the Vilna Gaon all the time, but certainly on Sukkot, we always like to share Vilna Gaon Torah, especially since it's his yahrzeit. So the Vilna Gaon bases his answer on a famous Ramban, Nachmanides, in the beginning of Bereshis, which is very fitting as we're going to be reading Sefer Bereshis shortly, this coming Shabbos. The Ramban writes, when he, in his introduction to the book of Bereshis, he writes, Sefer Bereshis is Shmosav Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That really the Torah, there was Torah in its pristine state, in its pure, unadulterated state, even before the Torah was around well before we were created. God looked at the Torah and created the world. So there was a pristine state. It didn't say in the Torah, like the Jews left Mitzrayim, the sin of the golden calf. All it was is Shmosav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was just names of God. That's why, according to the Ramban, that's how he explains that's why the halacha is a Sefer Torah that's missing Os Echad. You're missing a letter. There's an extra letter you have, missing letter. The Sefer Torah is puzzle. The Sefer Torah is no good. So much so, even if it wouldn't change the meaning of the word. Like we know there's a question in general. Let's say you, let's say about Koreh makes a mistake. So do you have to correct about Koreh? So you have 3 opinions. You have the opinion of the Soloveitchiks, who are very machmer. They say even if the Baal Koreh doesn't read the trup, the tune right, you have to correct him. Then you have on the other extreme, you have those who say that basically you shouldn't correct the Baal Koreh because you're embarrassing him publicly. Embarrassing publicly is a serious offense. According to some, it's even Yaharog Lial Yavo. You would have to give up your life for it. But what's the only example you have to give is, or what's an example of one? If you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Acher, you say another God instead of Hashem Echad, that has to be corrected. But anything less than that, you don't. Those are the 2 extreme opinions. And the middle opinion is, the way we paskin, as long as it doesn't change the meaning of the word. If it doesn't change the meaning of the word, so then it's okay. So, but that's not but the Ramban is saying even more than that. We don't pass this like the Ramban. That since the Torah is names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you're missing a letter, or have an extra letter, you're messing up the whole Torah, and therefore it's a Sefer Torah Pasuk. So that's the Ramban. That we had the original Torah, so to speak, was all, we wouldn't be able to, it wasn't decipherable to us. We'd look at it, it'd be like Chinese. We don't want to understand the word it's saying. But really it was the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there was order. And then the Torah Har Sinai, whenever he gave it over to Moshe then or later on, that's when he put it into things we understand. Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai, taking the Jews out of Egypt, etc. Right? That's the Ramban in the beginning of Sefer Bereshis. So the Vilna Gaon writes, based on this Ramban, we have a principle, Elu v'Elu Divrei Elokim Chayim. We have a principle in a Machlokes, Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, and others, that there's not the right and wrong, that everyone's right. Elu ve'elu are the words Divrei Elokim Chayim. It's a dynamic Torah. We might pass to like Beis Hillel or Beis Shammai in most of the cases, but it's not that Beis Shammai is wrong. In fact, in the books, in the Sifrei Kabbalah, they write that when we're not ready for Beis Shammai, but when the Mos HaMashiach comes, we will follow Shammai. It doesn't say that anywhere in Nigla, but that's what it says in Kabbalah. So, but the point being is we learn Beis. We don't say it's Bittul Torah. We learn Beis Hillel. We learn Beis Shammai. We're not just learning halacha l'mai. So they're all right, but when it comes to halacha, we pass them like one. So Elu Divrei Chayim. So the Vilna Gaon wants to say that both Rabbi Yeshua and Rav Shimon are right. Rabbi Yehuda said Yeshua wrote the last 8 psukim, and Rav Shimon says Moshe wrote the last 8 psukim. How can they both be right? Of course, the famous joke they say over is that I guess the husband and wife went to the Rav, and I guess they were having a little machokes. They wanted to say, let's go to the rabbi and discuss who's right. So the man said over his story, and the rabbi said, you're right. Then the wife said over his story, and the Rav said, you're right. Then the man said, but how can we both be right? Oh, you're right also. But the point being is, Elu ve'elu Divrei, that's a Shalom Bayis issue, that's a separate discussion. But Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Chayim. So therefore, how could they both be right? Who wrote it? I mean, Moshe wrote it or Yoshua wrote it? The Vilna Gaon says, no, they both wrote it. That Moshe, you know how Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last 8 psukim? He wrote it in its pure, unadulterated form. Shmosav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it wasn't any Miksei Kashikra. He didn't write Vayam Hashem Moshe. He wrote whatever the original, however it was before the world was created. He wrote it that way. And then Yoshua came along afterwards, after Moshe's death, and he wrote Vayam Hashem Moshe. And that's the pshat, the Lashon. So what do you mean he wrote it in tears? So that's not, no, the Vilna doesn't mean in tears. That he wrote a bedema from the word meduma. Like we have by truma. That if, let's say, something which is truma, like something you have to separate, if you separate maisa, you can eat it, and something could be tevel, you still can't eat. So when you have a mixture of truma and chulin together, it's called meduma mixture. That's what it means. It's a mixture. They both wrote it. Moshe wrote it in its pristine state, and therefore there's no why, he just wrote the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it was Yoshua who wrote it at the end. He said, he wrote Vayam Hashem Moshe, Eved Hashem. So, let's just summarize, we'll have to continue. So we were discussing who wrote the last 8 psukim. We all know it's a fundamental principle. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the whole Torah. Why would I even contemplate who wrote the last 8 psukim? So it's a machlokas in the Gemara Menachos and Baba Basra, whether one claims, Rabbi Yehuda claims that Yoshua wrote it because how could Moshe write about his own death? It's a lie. And Rav Shimon says, how can you say Yoshua wrote it? Of course Moshe wrote the whole Torah. And therefore they have to deal with each of their issues. So according to Rav Shimon, that Moshe wrote it, but even he agrees Moshe wrote it differently. The first part of the Torah was written, God told it to Moshe, Moshe said it over, and then he wrote it down. But by the second last 8 psukim, Moshe only did not say it over, and he wrote it down bedema. So what is bedema? It means a Rashi word. Rashi learned it means in tears. He was so upset he was going to die, so he wrote it and he was crying as he was writing it. The Maharsha said a different explanation. The Maharsha explained that basically Moshe didn't write it, didn't say it over, so he wasn't lying, and he wrote it, but he only wrote it with tears. The rest of the Torah was written in ink, and this was written in tears, and therefore it wasn't considered writing. And then we have the famous answer of the Vilna Gaon that, based on the Ramban, that They both wrote it. Moshe wrote in its original state all Shmos Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Yehoshua finished the job. He wrote the last 8 psukim. He wrote Vayam Hashem Moshe the way we have it today.